Well, we'll go ahead and get started. It's 8:30. I anticipate some people will join us. We have 66 people on the call right now. So again, appreciate your interest in being here. We're here tonight to discuss a proposed underground water tank, 10 million gallon water tank that's needed in the general vicinity around Orem Elementary and Mountain View High School and 400 West, 400 South. Specifically, the property that we're talking about in this meeting is the orchard on the southwest corner of 400 South, 400 West. It may be referred to tonight as the Farley property. Farley is the name of the family or individual that owns that property. I do want to give a little bit of kind of ground rules for tonight. Everybody has been muted and cameras have been turned off. This just allows to protect the integrity of the meeting from things like Zoom bombing and other things that have happened in Zoom calls that you've probably all seen over the last year as Zoom has become a normal way of doing business. There is a chat option we'd encourage you to use if you have questions as you go on. Some of those questions you'll see are popping up. We'll go through those as we discuss tonight. We have the majority of the presentation tonight will be done by Chris Shirkey, our Public Works Director, and Neil Winterton, our Water Division Manager. Chris and Neil, more than anybody, maybe with the exception of Sam Kelly, our City Engineer, know this project, have been involved in the studies from the beginning. There is also an option for you to raise hand, and then we can unmute you so that you can ask your question if that's your preference. Having just finished a previous meeting, using the chat function actually worked really well. It allowed us to kind of continue to flow through questions and eliminate the time it would take between muting and unmuting individuals. I don't want to take too much more of your time. I want to get you as much time for question and answer and presentation as absolutely possible. So with that, I will turn the time over to Chris and Neil. But let me just again thank you on behalf of the mayor and city council who are all on this call and watching and interested in this project. Thanks for being here. I hope you'll see the passion that we have for this community as well. As staff, we care deeply about the future of this community and this property, but we recognize that sometimes takes sacrifice and takes hard decisions, but ultimately builds us towards that better Orem that we all want to live in. So Chris, Neil, I'll turn the time over to you to get started with what we anticipate a 15 to 20 minute presentation, followed by 45 minutes to an hour of question and answer.
Okay, thank you, Stephen. I just wanted to introduce myself. I'm Chris Shirkey. I'm the Public Works Director, and I've been here at the city for 25 years. And I moved here in 1994 and have loved it ever since. I've been here. I met my wife here. We've had 5 of our children here. And so this is a community that I've lived in longer than any other community in my life, and I think I'll be here the rest of my life. So I really have a passion for Orem and for the good things that are about Orem, the people, the quality of life, and so forth. I'd like to recognize Neil Winterton also. He's our Water Resources Division Manager. Neil and I have been working on this project and the master plans for the water, the sewer, and the stormwater master plans since about 2014. We're now seeing some of these projects come to fruition. And so we would like to introduce to you tonight, especially for those who are not familiar with this project or these master plans, we would like to give you some background and the history of where we've been and how we've gotten to this point and arrived at these conclusions and made these recommendations that we are going to share with you tonight. We have received quite a bit of feedback from the community, and we wanted to let everyone know that you probably have received the invitation to this meeting on a door hanger, or you received an email. But we've tried to consolidate all of the frequently asked questions and categorize them, and they're available. I need to share the site with you so you can see this. So just a sec. Okay. The website that we're going to be referring to tonight is orem.org/watertank. And on this site, it contains the history of how we have arrived at these decisions and recommendations that we're making tonight. On the very front page, you'll notice that there are 5 drop-down or tabs here: the introduction, identifying the problem, a solution, project facts associated with this project, additional resources. These are links to presentations and other documents that are available. The 2016 Culinary Water Master Plan, for example, is included here as well. But on this first page, you'll notice that there are frequently asked questions. Perhaps you've gone out and watched some of these videos, or you've already seen and observed some of these questions. If you click on that View the FAQs Now, you'll notice that this is a live link to the site, and it has questions that have been asked. Some of them are listed in perhaps not the same wording, but we've tried to consolidate in an attempt to make this as efficient as possible in the communications. You'll notice that there are 38 questions that have been identified, and I think we have quite a few more that have been generated in this first presentation that was given, and the discussion that we had. I thought it was a very good discussion at 7 o'clock, and we'll have a similar discussion right now. We will update this document. This will be a living document. It's not a static document. So new questions that are asked, we will try to consolidate those and put them on here with those answers for reference as well, with links and so on and so forth. I don't know, Stephen, if you mentioned, but we would encourage everybody here, if you have a question, to go ahead and enter that in the chat area on the Zoom presentation. And then after we give the history and the background of how we've gotten to this point, we'll go into those one by one. So let me go ahead and share the presentation with you. Just one moment. This presentation was given to the City Council on January 12th, 2021. And we wanted to share that again with anybody here, in particular those that do not have the background. And so in essence, we love water in Orem. We have probably some of the best water in the nation. We have water that comes from a variety of sources, from groundwater, meaning wells, and also surface water in the form of rain and snow. That water is collected and delivered to us through Jordanelle Reservoir and the Deer Creek Reservoir, through the Provo River. It's treated at the Central Utah Water Conservancy District, and then it's distributed throughout the community. And the northeast part of our community, that is where our water treatment facilities are and all of our storage. We are concerned about all of the storage in one location. And we also understand, as a result of these master plans and further analyses that have occurred, that we have a need to have another 10 million gallons of storage today. That has been confirmed by 2 different engineering firms, Bowen Collins and Associates and Hansenell and Luce, and in addition to the Division of Drinking Water with the state of Utah. Bowen Collins and Associates performed this master plan, and the master plan identifies our current conditions and also looks forward into the future, and it projects what the conditions will be based on future demands that are a result of growth and new population, new families moving in, and our population increasing. I mentioned that I moved here in 1994. The population then was around 63,000 people. Today, it is really close to 100,000. So in that time frame, we have increased the population by more than 50%. This master plan identifies these, as you look at the legend here, this area in the central part of the community indicates that we have pressures that are lower than what we would like to have. We're showing that under peak day demands, peak hour demands, you might have a pressure around 45 pounds or 50 pounds in these areas. And some areas indicated or shown by red, the pressures have been observed at about 30 to 45 pounds. We also have been experiencing higher velocities, and we're projecting even higher velocities in the future as we deliver the water from the northeast part of town to the central part of the community, and even all the way to the southwest part of the community. That has caused us to have great concern. And so right now we're looking at preemptively and prospectively mitigating those concerns that will have multi-generational positive effects on our community. This is a similar map, but it also, what the difference is here is this is looking at the peak hour demand for future conditions with respect to pressures and velocities. You'll notice in the central zone, there's a lot more red dots there. In other words, at build out, or as we continue to grow and increase our water demand on the system, it puts a strain or a stress on that system. We have a dark line that comes down this area here. We call that the Reach 2 line. That is a major transmission line in the community. You'll notice that it has velocities that are greater than 10 feet per second. If you compare this in an analogous way to your heart and to your internal organs, this is not a good thing. In other words, you want to make sure your aorta is healthy and is functioning properly. And this is an indication that we have future health problems in our water system. And the analysis further indicates that we can resolve these concerns by developing a new source of water in the central part of our community, thereby deferring or delaying that increased velocity or increased flows from the northeast to the central part of our community. And we can create an independent source and then have also additional storage at this location in the central part of the town. What this will allow us to do is to mitigate these pressures. We'll have increased pressures that will be known after this project has been completed. We'll have additional water source in this central part of the community. Many of you are probably aware that we have the Wasatch Fault on the eastern bench in the northeast part of our community. This will help to mitigate some of those and alleviate some of those concerns. From a water storage perspective, we'll be able to, if you will, expand our portfolio or diversify it from a water storage perspective so that we can ensure that we have water distributed throughout the community in the event of a major event. And so this is a very strategic plan that we have put together in conjunction with these two engineering firms that I've mentioned. What this indicates here, W1 is a future well location located generally at Orem Community Park. ST1 is a storage tank. A 10 million gallon storage tank is what I've mentioned earlier. We're currently deficient from a storage perspective. You might wonder, well, what does that mean to the community? 10 million gallons, it seems like a lot. And it is. On a peak day, in the summertime, in July or August, we will have produced 60 million gallons of water and delivered that to the community, to the citizens of Orem. So we have 22 million gallons of storage today. We're deficient 10. And as soon as we hit that 10, we'll be meeting our needs for our current demands. So a lot of our water is augmented through 9 drinking water wells scattered throughout the community. And they're often located directly in neighborhoods on a residential lot, much like what we're going to be discussing tonight. So this plan that we have put in place indicates that we have a need for a water tank and a well and a booster station in the central zone of the city of Orem. Generally speaking, we've looked at this area west of State Street and east of 800 West on the bench area. The reason why we have it on the bench area is because this water tank will be providing gravity-fed water to the west and to the southwest part of our community, which has been determined in the Hansen-Allen-Luce study to have a deficiency in the future of maybe 5 to 6 million gallons of storage. So this will help to resolve that future need and to also mitigate and to resolve some of our immediate needs from a pressure perspective in the central zone today. I'm going to turn the time over to Neil, who's going to conclude the presentation, and then we'll have time for Q&A. And Neil, I'll turn it over to you. as many of you know, we just gave this presentation in the previous meeting. And so what I'd really like to do is condense my portion so we can get to the Q&A portion a lot quicker. The previous meeting was held at 7 o'clock, and we gave and started the presentation in this same manner. I would invite you to go look at that so that we can move forward to get to my questions. The one thing I wanted to point out is Chris started his map in the whole city, and then he showed a little bit smaller map. And without going into the details of why the tank location was chosen where it was, we'll move forward to all studies, and everything that we have done have pointed to this general location of Community Park. One after the other, the options were taken off the table, and then in the end, a certain option was selected, not that others were eliminated, only that that was the recommended option based on cost, proximity to Fourth South, and programmed sports. What has led us to reach out to this particular neighborhood surrounding the Farley property is in 2019, we approached Mr. Farley to introduce the idea of possibly purchasing a portion or all of the property there to place the tank. From an engineering and a hydraulic perspective, it was an option. The Alpine School District softball field was an option. The community park was an option. Mr. Farley told us he didn't want to sell. We moved forward in the planning process, ultimately leading to a recommendation to the location shown in yellow on the west side of Community Park. Like I said, the other meeting, we went into great detail with that. So I'd like to reserve the time of those details for the Q&A portion. But after we released the recommendation to the City Council as the location in yellow, we met with a few of the surrounding neighbors. Some of the surrounding neighbors indicated that they knew Mr. Farley, maybe on a more personal level. And they reached out to Mr. Farley and then reported back to us that he might be interested now. The city has since engaged with the property owner, Mr. Farley, and we felt like now that that is an option, we should meet with the surrounding neighbors to discuss the ideas and the questions and concerns that they might have, because where the tank is constructed will have some impact and some inconveniences to the surrounding area. One of the questions that's come up quite a bit in the last meeting and then now in this chat is about the baseball diamond option. Chris, so if you wouldn't mind just going directly to that graphic where we have put together a simple discussion using colors. You can see that the baseball diamond is right there in the same area that we've been talking about from a hydraulic and from an engineering perspective. Neil, is that new? Is the new map showing up there?
Yeah.
Okay,
yeah.
good. All right.
So you can see that previously we hadn't shown an exact rectangle. Well, our rectangle concepts are just that. They're concepts. They're not exact or precise shapes or sizes or precise locations. They are at concept level 50 feet from improvements. And the 50 feet was a number we used to create a buffer and to create constructability, to slope the ground when you dig a hole, to not affect the properties next to it, or whether it's residential or a roadway, whatever the case may be, we left 50 feet. We didn't recommend the baseball field as an option because it's a programmed sports location, and it didn't provide as many
it provided the same level of benefit basically as the green and the yellow from a hydraulic and engineering perspective. But as we have gone back to look at the Farley property, we felt like we should put it up as something to discuss and move forward with the discussion of that, since it's an option from an engineering perspective. We haven't reached out to the Mountain View High School baseball team or anyone associated with that particular sport. We imagine that there would be some intense opposition to that. But nevertheless, we have shown that as an option. So I guess barring any questions as to why we need a tank, Chris talked about that. Let's just move forward with the assumption that this general area shown on the screen is the best option, confirmed by two separate, reputable, talented engineering companies and individuals and engineering teams separate from the city, hired independently to analyze this. This is the location due to the proximity of distribution lines that will eventually go over the hill, distance from our existing water source features, and appropriate separation from all of the storage that we have, and trying to create redundancy and the benefits of having not all of your eggs in one basket with the storage in the Northeast area, being able to serve the residents in an emergency. We don't want to have something crazy happen, like people out of power, millions in Texas. We don't want to be out of water in the event that an earthquake severs major lines in those arteries that Chris showed on the previous map. So this general area is the best location for the tank. I hope that we can move forward with that and just maybe jump right to the questions, so we don't spend any more time on us, and we move right to the people who came here to ask us questions.
Neil, let's jump in. Again, if anybody wants to ask questions, we encourage you to use the chat feature that's located at the bottom. There's also an opportunity to raise your hand, and we can unmute you if you feel more comfortable asking your question that way. But with that, we'll jump right in.
Chris, I have a proposal. Why don't we take every other question on this one?
Meaning you and Chris will alternate. We'll take every question, but
yeah, for sure. Chris and I alternate just to rest our voice.
I thought maybe you had counted and you determined which ones you didn't want to answer, but no, we'll go with every question. And yeah, however you and Chris want to do that. Neil, let's start with you just while you have the mic.
Yeah.
Where would the pump house and electric station be located on the Farley property?
It's a good question, because we are in negotiations with Farley right now. Unsure if we would have access to all of the property, and unsure of where we would be able to put access roads or other features that we would need to access the pump house. So we've shown this purple square as a location for the tank. Ideally, again, as close to 4th South as possible is where we would anticipate that well and pump house to be.
And maybe, Neil, if I could add, this was represented in the last meeting too. Mr. Farley has expressed his interest in living on the property. And so that will somewhat determine what we can do. Question, and I'm gonna get the name wrong, but this is from Breland. Susan, and I'll just say Susan Z, with the Land and Water Conservation Fund, stated in the past that she knows of 2 tanks that were covered with grass, and then later determined it was not safe to keep it grassed or have people playing on top of the tank. What measures are being taken to guarantee that this tank will be grassed from here on out and safe for people to enjoy and play on top of? The green space at Orem Community Park is being considered is used every single day. It is loved, valued, and a rare gem in Central Orem. The risk of losing green space is very scary for everyone.
Okay, yeah, that is that is a consideration we need to take into account with the design. I would be interested in talking with Susan. I know her, and I could look into that with Susan and try to understand what may have happened with those tanks. However, when our tank is designed here, we will be building it to the most current and relevant standards that we have available today for underground storage facilities. We anticipate this will be a reinforced concrete tank. It will not be a corrosive tank. In other words, it's not going to be a metal tank that may be damaged in any way that and not structurally sound. And so we have tanks today that are buried in Orem. There are new tanks that were just built in Provo that are buried as well, that are used for recreational purposes. There are tanks that are buried located in other communities with the recreational purposes established on top of them. One that we recently referenced was Clearfield High School has a water tank. And maybe I'll pull that up for at a future time in a future answer to the question. But it has been designed with baseball. They have no problems with that today. So I can't speak specifically to those two, but we're going to design it with the greatest degree of engineering analysis and using the greatest standards that we have today.
Great. Next question. We've focused on the Farley property and the west side of Community Park, yet the area under the baseball diamond seems so ideal. Is it being considered as a top contender?
Yeah, I would consider all of these have at one time been considered based on their merits. I would suggest that we steered clear of both the baseball diamond and the north soccer field that is programmed, and ultimately recommended the area to the west for that simple purpose. Under the Alpine School District softball fields was a great option that we really loved, and we felt like we could relocate those softball uses to our Lakeside Sports Park down west of here without modifying the fields, because there are currently softball fields. A baseball field has a little bit different dimensions. So that was one reason why we didn't, but I think it certainly is in the discussion. I would dare to guess that, as I mentioned before, those associated with Mountain View High School baseball would be in extreme opposition for similar reasons that others are in opposition as well. So if you built it there, it would put the softball or the baseball field out of commission for one, if not two seasons. I think that answers both of those.
Yeah. Next question here on the chat. Some of the neighbors have been told that Mr. Farley may not want to keep his home on his property. If he does want to sell his entire property, would that change the dig site footprint so it is further away from the existing homes?
It certainly opens up the door to do that and to change the overall size of that footprint. I'll zoom in on that so we can have a good discussion on that site. This is currently laid out at 300 by 300 feet with a 50-foot offset from the homes. If Mr. Farley would consider relocating, then that footprint will certainly change, and it could be located farther to the north or farther to the east. So none of these are set in stone, and obviously If we enlarge the overall square footage of that footprint for that same 10 million gallons of water, that makes the tank shallower, which has a significant impact on our cost of the line that will come out of the bottom of that tank, which, if it's this footprint is 300 by 300, and so that depth is 15 feet. If you were to increase the square footage of that and stretch it to the east and to the north a little bit, you might be able to get the depth of that tank to around 10 or 12 feet, which would, every foot of depth makes a big difference in cost. So long answer to that question, but certainly that would be an opportunity.
Okay, next question, kind of a scenario and then a question. Considering the relative size of the tank, pictured in yellow, this was the City Park one version, it could easily fit on the Farley property. The city could then recoup costs by selling the perimeter for upscale residential single-family dwellings and continue 490 West Street North to 400 South. I'm sure there are several developers that would love to develop that perimeter. This would be contingent upon purchase of the entire Farley property. One advantage to this, like we've seen with Orem Community Park, is that a park surrounded by residential is safer and is watched over by those motivated residential homeowners. Would that be a possible consideration?
Yeah, I appreciate the creativity and the thinking there. First, let's just talk about the reason that we have recommended the park property, and that is that the city already owns that property. So we would first need to decide if it's the right reason if there's proper reason and good reason and enough value to the city to purchase the Farley property at the price for which is being asked. If we were to buy the entire property, could we sell it off if we put the same size tank on there, is also a good question. It dovetails in with Chris's answer to every bit that we can save going deep, not only saves on the excavation of the tank itself, but helps with the excavation of the purple line that's going to leave the tank and eventually go all the way to the west. So those things would need to be considered in the overall detailed analysis of that property. In as much as it's not currently an option, we haven't gone down that path that far, but we have started thinking about different options and the cost differential between the two. In the previous meeting, we did mention that there's some cost savings with the depth of pipe associated with the Farley piece being right around $750,000. But those exact details would need to be worked through if that full piece was available and if it was determined that was in the best interest of the entire city to buy that.
Great. Let's go on to the next question. This is from Greg Olson. As one of the residents with properties bordering the Farley property, I just wanted to voice my support for that potential option if it is viable. It seems like there would be less of a community impact if this site was selected. If selected, what are the plans for the property? Would a green space park be built, or would it be occupied with a pump house property?
So the answer is yes, and yes, it would have potentially would have a green open space. Of course, that would need to be reviewed and approved by the city council and staff and so forth. One of the ideas is that could be just kind of a more of a passive open park area that could be flat for kids to come and play and throw a frisbee and run around with their dog and so forth, whatever it might be. Probably not a programmed property, although I can't say that's not the case. I don't think that it would be. There would need, with every one of these solutions for a tank, there is also a need for a well and a pump station. And ideally, you would like to have that well and pump station located as close to the tank as possible to minimize costs for pipe for transmission of that of the water with the pipe network. In this case, with the west side or the yellow property here, we're looking at this property for purchase for that well house and pump house. That is strategically located there, although that could also be used in conjunction with the red tank as well. If we were to divest ourselves of that real estate purchase there, there would be an option at the blue site, and we would put a well and a pump house at that location, most likely. Or in the same vein, we'd have a pump house located here. Nothing has been designed or laid out, but there would be a pump and, or excuse me, a well and a pump house built in conjunction with the tank on that property too. I would like to share my screen regarding what it could look like as well. So this happens to be a property in Sandy, and it's a nice area. And as you zoom in, this, can everyone see this map? I believe you can. Okay. So this address here where it says 1987, that is a well house. Now, admittedly, we don't have anything that looks as nice as that in Orem from a well house or a pumping house perspective, but this is what it looks like from the curb. I think they've done an excellent job. It pales in comparison in size compared to the neighbors over here and over here, but I think they've done some really nice architectural design for that property. So if it's in a neighborhood, if it's in a residential area, our goal is to make it look as nice as we can, perhaps even similar to what you see here in this picture.
Chris, thanks. Next question from Bree Lynn. Many of us are curious if the Mountain View football field has been revisited.
It was on the original analysis to look at and discuss. We briefly put it up there as it was an option for open space. We quickly learned that from a distance from 4th South and a restoration cost perspective, it's just not a good location for a water tank. The high school has recently replaced the surface with artificial turf, and it is not a good location for a water tank with a cost and a feasibility perspective.
Okay, thanks, Neil. This is from Diane Ogborn. Can you address conflicts of interest between the engineering firms who prepared the analysis maps, water tank construction companies, city employees and elected officials, and Alpine School District?
Well, I'm not aware of any conflicts of interest with either of the engineering firms, Bowen Collins and Associates or Hansnell and Luce. City employees, I don't believe there are any conflicts of interest. I'd be interested to know if there's something more specific that you have in mind. But to my knowledge, there are none.
Perfect. And Diana, that's not sufficient. If there's something specific you're thinking of, if you'll reach out to us and we can address that question, of course. Next one. I assume the staging area for construction will be larger than the tank itself. What will the impact on park availability be during construction? Will the through road remain open, the south parking lot, the baseball field, the track, access from 300 South? If the Farley property is selected, would it require 400 South or 400 West to be closed?
Yeah, that's a good good thing to notice, that the rectangles, let's just start with those, are conceptual sizes of a tank. But let's assume that those are the final tank dimensions. The staging area would be much larger. You'd need dig a much larger hole. And then there'd be a lot of material that would be need to be left on site and not hauled off. And so we would anticipate the staging area north of the yellow tank, all the way close up to the tennis courts possible. And then we would leave the pavilion and restroom in service, more than likely. The south parking lot would possibly be utilized for some staging. We would have other pipelines running through that with the yellow option. So there would be a disruption there for those pipelines. Let's see, this baseball field. With the yellow option, the baseball field would remain in service. The track would remain in service. Everything on the east side would remain in service. Access to the park from 350 South would be limited because of the construction going on at that particular location. Let's see. If the Farley property is selected, would 4th South or 4th West, there would be times when utility connections are made and full roadway crossings, similar to any other major utility line, there would be some closures. We would anticipate that those would remain open for most of the time, and closures would occur in off hours to accommodate necessary connections or things like that.
Neil, if I could jump in here for just a
Sure.
second, Mayor speaking. If you look at the Farley property and you look to the north on 400 South, and then you look across to the school, that is where all the school buses come in and drop off their students. It's also where most of the parents come in and drop off their students. And so I believe that if you were to use the Farley property, I believe there would be major disruption along there. And that area is extremely congested as it is right now. The intersection is congested when school is starting and when school lets out. And I'm sure that most of the people that are on this call have experienced the congestion that is in there and the amount of kids that are being dropped off and picked up. I believe that would be a major concern and a major problem with the Farley property.
Certainly a concern, certainly things that would need to be addressed. As we look at all of these options, there are many considerations with access, safe routes, traffic, exported material, staging. All of those things would need to be addressed with each and every one of these sites, and the Farley property is no different. You're right. We would have to take that into consideration and maybe limit truck access outside of those peak times that coincide with start and stop times with school. We would evaluate all of the different concerns of each site uniquely with each location once the final location is selected.
Next question, will there be other tanks in the future, or is this it?
Excellent question. So this tank, after it is constructed, it'll bring us up to what our current requirements are per state rule and regulations that are managed by the Division of Drinking Water. So we will meet our current demands and needs from a water storage perspective. Yes, there will be future tanks. In this study that has been cited on this website at orem.org/watertank, the Hansnell and Luce study indicates that we will have a need for another tank located likely in the northeast part of our community, around another 10 million gallon tank in the future. And so as the city grows, this is kind of an answer to the next question, I believe, as well. But as the city grows and demands are placed on that system, pipes may need to be replaced and increased in terms of size, and also storage requirements will increase as well. So at build out, if for example, Orem grows to 150,000, 140,000 people, we will definitely need more storage. And that study does indicate that in greater detail.
Chris, that does take to the next question. And that is, the question is, so is the need for this water tank the result of allowing growth beyond our water capacity?
The answer to that is no. You have different, this is a daily water demand operational issue. When we start talking about water capacity and source water, that's more dependent on the snow in the mountains, the level of water in the reservoirs, and the water available through water rights in the aquifers. So to say this is because we grew beyond our capacity, no. We have had access to other storage options through our friends and neighbors, the Central Utah Water Conservancy District. That storage is, we've been kindly asked, and they have been patient with us as we go through our siting and funding process to get our own storage. And so this is for Orem residents out of a growth and a daily operational need. And those who have built in Orem and grown in Orem have paid their fair share through impact fees, and they pay their fair share on water rates. And this is a project associated and funded through those means.
Next question, where would the entrance, this is as we're speaking about the Farley property, where will the entrance into the water tank be located?
If the question's referring to the tank itself, it'll be off on the edges. It will not be disrupting any recreational play or anything like that. If they're referring to entrance to the street, I would recommend that it would come off of 400 West for a truck or vehicle access. I'm not sure what specifically they're asking there, but tank access, there will be hatches on the perimeter of the tank.
Great. To kind of keep moving, the next question, the mayor mentioned that the cost of purchasing Farley's property may be an issue. Can you tell us how much cheaper it would be to build at the park than to repair roads in the park, etc.? He talked about our water bills increasing if we purchase the property, but won't they increase if you have to repair and rebuild the area around the park?
So basically, it comes down to the increased cost of the land. There is some savings. We're going to have to rebuild a park surface in either location. So those are kind of a net zero on that. We did mention that there is roughly a $750,000 construction cost savings by building the tank a little bit higher in elevation on the Farley property. But as far as the roads and the repair done, we're going to have to repair the roads in 4th South. We're going to have to repair the roads on 4th West. We're going to have to repair the roads on 600 West, on 700 West, when they need it. And so I think what the mayor was referring to is the dramatic costs of the property versus building on the property that we already own. And it would cost the residents of Orem to build that through their water bill. And I'll let the mayor speak if he'd like to, since they mentioned you in that.
Sure. So if we have to spend $3.5 to $5 million for the Farley property, that has not been figured into our approach for construction, for the bond, for the money that we've saved for the water tank. In speaking with our staff, it's my understanding that if we did buy the Farley property, we would have to increase some of the money on our water base rate to all the residents in Orem. Could be 72, 75 cents additional. And if we had to purchase that, there's just a lot more involved. Where we own property already in the park, that property would be a great property to use. Again, the red area is away from any homes. We do have elevation, but and we do have the ballpark, but I believe that the ballpark and the sports programs can be moved to another park in Orem. We have a lot of parks that are available, and we can move that for a temporary basis for 2 years. And I believe that the hydrology, the closeness to Forest South, all of that works well towards that red centered area there in the middle. And our goal has always been to try to hook up to Forest South. Again, the safety of the children, one of the things that we've said is that safety is our #1 issue. And to me, safety of the children attending Orem Elementary is paramount, and the Farley farm would put that at high risk. And so we really not only need to consider the money, consider the hydrology, consider the elevation, we need to consider the safety of our residents and of our children.
Mayor, thanks. And that is, Neil, Chris, if there's anything else you'd add, Mayor answered the next question, which was, how about the safety of the children at Orem Elementary during the difficult construction? And maybe if I could even paraphrase, I think wherever we build this, that's something we're going to be considering and looking into. And there's nobody, not interested in making sure that the children are kept safe. Chris, anything you'd add, Neil?
Well, I'm sharing, if you all can see this, the safe route map that's on the, is this the school district's website? I believe.
Yeah.
This is the most current and up-to-date version of their safe route plan for walking to school. It identifies crossing guard locations, school crosswalks, and so forth. So regardless of the location, we will need to develop a new and modified, updated plan specific for children accessing the school from whatever location is eventually selected. So I would imagine, for example, there may be additional crossing guard locations, or maybe an additional path created as needed around the site that's protected. So obviously, safety is of our utmost importance, and we will take that into consideration and coordinate with the community, the parents that live in this area, of the children, in developing those plans with the Orem Elementary School.
Great. Just a comment here. Mountain View works with the city a lot. They'll be sharing their parking lot with the rec center. I would put them at the last of options because they may start feeling frustrated. Next, that's just a statement from Kathy Ambrose. Next, I believe the water tank is better served long-term if it's placed in the park and not the orchard. If the need for maintenance and access later comes up, it's a lot easier to do so in the park in what most likely will turn into housing. It may be cheaper, but cutting corners always bites people later.
Yeah, I think they're assuming that maybe homes would be built on top of the tank after, and homes would not be placed upon the tank after. We would, as stated, we would need full access to the full surface of the tank, and we would not allow homes to be placed on the tank.
Next question. Bear with me, this one's a little longer, but I'd like to hear more about transporting the materials to and from the water tank on the community park. This would be done on 600 West. 1, does the city have any interest for these 2 families living on 600 West? 2, is the city going to give written guarantees of liability to these properties? Damage to sewer and water lines going to and on these properties, damage to their home affected by the vehicles carrying these massive loads, cracks in their cement driveways, digging a trench and installing a 24-inch line along 600 West. How are these 2 residents to get out of their homes to go to the grocery store, go to a doctor's appointments? Remember, these 2 residents are over the age of 70. Why doesn't the city increase the size of the entire length of 600 West? These 2 homes are less than 50 feet from this major road where these huge trucks are going to be going.
Um, these are very, very significant concerns and indeed challenges that we have to address. We recognize, and I'll zoom in on those properties there. I believe the reference is these two homes that face out to this 600 West Street and that access. Again, these lines are schematically drawn here. We would anticipate that we would need to, again, depending on which option is selected, let's say, for example, the green or red is selected, that these lines would be built perhaps in the school district property. We would obtain easements. We would try to maintain the access on this road. It would be maintained and open 100% of the time. We cannot block accesses to private properties. So we will need to make accommodations and widen this out on the east side as needed. The school district and the city have been in discussions regarding widening 6th West around this corner and on the east side of 6th West up to a certain point over here. That could perhaps be extended even farther to the north as needed. So widening the road is certainly an option, and that is something that we are planning on doing to the north a certain distance. Regarding damages to any private utilities, driveways, cracking and so forth, certainly if we have damaged anything and we can show that it was clearly us that damaged it, then the city would be liable and responsible to make repairs and to have to take those and take those actions. So we recognize, Mr. Jolly, that you live there and your neighbor, and that you have a need to get in and out of your properties. So we are sensitive to that. We will work directly with you on that as a team with the city and the contractor. And let's see, why doesn't the city increase the size of the entire? Okay, maybe the entire width all the way up and around, perhaps. 6 West could be widened to the north. I think at this intersection is probably appropriate. I'd have to ask or talk to our transportation folks on if they think that would be a good solution there. One thing that we do promote in the city is traffic calming, and that often entails curves in a road, narrower roads that we call sublocal roads. And then that helps keep speeds down. When we widen roads, that generally we have multiple lanes, we have more volume, more traffic, and so forth. Well, while that might be a nice advantage to have a wider road here during construction, afterwards, I believe a narrower road that is more quiet and not as wide might be more beneficial from a traffic calming safety perspective overall. But we'd love to talk to Mr. Jolly off, after this meeting or tomorrow, if you'd like. Hopefully I've answered your question sufficiently. There are many questions there. So we would love to chat with you, Mr. Jolly.
Perfect. Let's move on. And just for, so everybody knows, we'll go till about 10 o'clock. We will save all questions that are asked. We will pass this to staff. Questions unanswered will be added to our FAQs at orem.org/water tank. Just a statement here. Mountain View has one of the smallest school footprints for a high school in the district. This campus has been highly impacted already by city projects. So statement from Keith Wilson. The next question, Janelle Mitchell, this one is a duplicate. She did ask this one. We answered that earlier about water capacity. Next, we live behind the yellow rectangle and take issue with preferring the yellow rectangle over the baseball diamond only because of scheduled organized sports. For one, we see hundreds of people enjoying that portion of park many days of the year. Also, I feel like having 2 to 3 years of construction within a few feet of many houses is a much bigger issue than having baseball games at a different park for Neil's potentially for 1 to 2 seasons.
The reason that we selected and recommended the yellow, which I don't think it's a few feet from the houses, so I don't think that's a fair statement. It is 50 feet away from the property. That may not soothe your concern as far as it being close, because that is close. But ultimately, from a organized sports perspective, like we'd mentioned before, it's challenging to relocate a baseball-sized piece of infrastructure versus open green space. To argue that someone can go play baseball somewhere else and people can't go walk their dog, play frisbee or volleyball somewhere else, to me, that's a splitting hairs of your opinion. So I would agree that some people may feel and have a different opinion on that. And so that's where we get into the discussion of opinions.
Okay, next question from Diane Ogborn. You've talked about the red squares being Orem City property, but Orem citizens are not allowed to use this property. Only the high school baseball team. Does this use meet Orem City needs? Why does the high school have sole use of the property? This does not follow LWCF guidelines.
So this property is owned by the city of Orem, as Diane has indicated, and it is used by Mountain View High School and programmed by the Mountain View High School. There are 4 softball fields over here in the southeast portion of this park area. These are owned by Alpine School District, but we have an arrangement where we are allowed to program 3 of these fields, the east 2 fields and the southwest field, for softball, for girls softball, for boys baseball, and the northwest portion is designated for Mountain View High School girls softball. But all of these properties can be used by the public. But we do have arrangements in place where we also have the tennis courts up here. I didn't mention those. These are also on Orem City property, but we've had a relationship with the school district where we share land, share uses that are generally used by the population at large. I don't know that it does not follow Land and Water Conservation Fund guidelines. I'd have to refer to others to get a confirmation on that.
Yeah. Let's take one question. We have John Erickson has raised his hand, and John will ask you to unmute and give you a chance to ask your question.
So the Mountain View baseball diamond is not available for use for all people in the public. It is locked and no one is allowed to go in there. So it's not a public accessible property.
Okay. Thanks, John. One more question, and then we'll go back to the chat. This is from this is Kathy Ambrose. Kathy.
Yes, the arrangement Mountain View has with Orem City is that Mountain View lets Orem City use their gyms for the Orem City Recreation Youth programs in exchange for use of the baseball field. The Orem City uses Mountain View property all the time, and that is the deal that has been in existence since the school came to be.
Thank you, Kathy. Let's go back to the chat here. How earthquake proof will this tank be?
It will be built to the highest seismic standards in the building codes today. So I would say that it will be as earthquake proof as any other structure that is built today. It's important to note that this will not be under pressure. So when an earthquake happens, even if in some way it's cracked or damaged, the water will not burst open in a gush. It will follow gravity, and it will not be under pressure in a geyser situation.
Great, thank you, next question. Mr. Farley's interest in keeping his home has not been confirmed. It was relayed to us by Mr. Farley. He doesn't have interest in staying at his home if he sells. If he does not wish to keep his home, would that mean that the purple square would be moved from the property line of Farley's property, putting it on the corner of 4th and 4th, much farther from property lines?
Yeah, I think we did answer that previously. So there's nothing set in stone here. If Mr. Farley elects to sell and to relocate somewhere else, the size of this and the location of this tank is yet to be determined. We can move it farther away from the property lines, and we'd have much more flexibility and be able to create open space perhaps for 5.7 acres of land that is there today. So that's a very good observation.
Next one, the impact to the neighbors in the area around 400 South, 400 West will be much more significant than the impact to the neighbors around the park, since the houses are much closer to the building site in comparison to the houses that surround the park. Do you have thoughts on this?
Well, that only points out that there are neighbors everywhere. And we've placed these tanks 50 feet away from residences and roads, including the baseball field. That's the only one that doesn't have residents within 50 feet. But we placed it away from the roads. So I can't say that anybody will be less impacted unless we put it under the baseball field. Even the green has a lot of homes next to it, and as someone mentioned earlier, the staging area is not just simply the footprint of the tank, but there will need to be things around the tank. So to say that those at 4th West and 4th South would be more impacted than those over on the west side of Community Park, again, there's an opinion of who will be impacted more by which choice.
Next, this is a statement with a little effort, we could locate a new location for Mountain View High School baseball. Comparing moving organized sports with digging 50 feet from property lines seems a little trivial to the many residents living in the area. And then just a shout out to Kelly. That is such a creative and awesome idea. Kathy Ambrose statement, make sure you give Mr. Farley the free rec center access and tank naming rights. That will sweeten the deal. Next, does Orem have a dog park? That seems like something that would be great to have on the Farley property.
Yeah, Orem has a dog park. It is in northeast Orem, on the northeast boundary of the community. It's at Mount Timpanogos Park.
And maybe, Chris, I will mention, there was a public process during that too. And actually the yellow area that you see here was identified as a potential dog park. The neighbors in that area were not keen on that, which made it moved up to Canyon, which suggests that you'd likely find the same pushback on the purple property as to a dog park being that close to residential areas. Next, Mountain View. Oh, Kathy spoke to this already about them giving access for youth programs in exchange for the baseball diamond. A message from our city manager that we actually do have a 2016 contract that does define that relationship with Alpine School District. If Mr. Farley does want to live there, would he consider an option to purchase the remainder later? I think that there have hits that in the future additional storage will be needed. A second tank could be located on that part and use the same pump house. So could two tanks be located on the Farley property and be able to continue to use that one pump house?
You know, the speculation that we should buy, again, just pointing back to should we buy the property when we already have property is the first question to ask in that. Negotiating the deals of that would be the second question. Do we have access to the full property? I think we should probably wait on whether or not we should buy the property and how much is available until we dive into that level of detail moving forward. I will suggest that the second round of storage is suggested again to be diversified and possibly in a different location. But those are details certainly that we would explore if in fact the decision is to move forward with the purchase of the expensive property, and then how much of that is available to us. We would explore that.
Next question, are all of these locations viable well options?
Yes, there are equally viable. The bench area of Orem is, I would represent as a highly coveted area for drinking water and for groundwater and for wells. The last well we built on the bench it produces over 4,000 gallons a minute. And all of the wells to the west of here that Central Utah has drilled are producing upwards of 5,000 gallons a minute. So we fully anticipate these will be equally viable.
Next question from Murray Lowe. What is the magnitude of having to buy the property on the total cost of the project? Does it increase the cost by 25, 50, double it? What would be an approximate increase?
The property we've mentioned and represented that it's $3.5 to $5 million depending on the negotiation that occurs and what we would anticipate. Again, we haven't gotten into the depths of those negotiations yet. The cost of the tank is around $13 million. So when you look at the ratio there, to quickly do that is anywhere from 30 to 40%, I would say, on the tank itself.
What are the potential? Let's see. How will this project, if built on the Farley property, affect property values? Many of us fear that our property values will decline.
That is an excellent question. We were meeting with an appraiser actually this week, and our property acquisition team has been instructed and told by the appraiser if the tank were to be above the ground, it would have potentially an impact on property values in a negative way. But if it's buried, he indicated that he would not deduct the property value on the value of the property adjacent to it.
Okay, next question. I'd like to add that there is the $750,000 in piping cost and the home purchased for $650,000 needed to purchase a home from the pump house, which would not be required at the Farley location. $1,400,000 in savings compared to Farley property, which not to mention the rebuilding costs. The cost to widen 600 West and the purchase that extra land would be additional cost still. There's been a lot of talk of how much Farley's would cost to purchase, but I would be interested in seeing exactly how much more Farley's would cost with all of these things considered. And if I can just represent, we don't know exactly what that cost would be yet. And so I don't, given the number of questions we have, Chris and Neil, I think we'll move on. We don't know that yet, but there would be a netting out that we would have to look at.
Can I mention on this though? She's right. The 750 plus the 650, that's a net 1.4. If the property goes at, and I don't know, the council would agree to something like this, but if it was at 800,000 an acre, that's $4.5 million. So that would net 3.1. So it all depends on how much he would ask and how much the city council would support purchasing.
Yeah, we acknowledge that those savings are there and that is part of the evaluation, and that's why we've represented a wide range of cost increase, not a specific.
And maybe I would just mention too, wherever we build the tank, we will have to rebuild on top of it. Something has to be put in, improvements would be made. So there wouldn't be improvements on only one of the two sites. It would be done either way. Is that fair?
Yeah, and it would be done, if we chose to put a park there with a pavilion and have a bathroom or something like that, we would need to put those there if we're developing it as a public space. So again, there are no concrete plans or designs for that, but that would need to be a consideration.
Next question, will this project coincide with upgrading the 400 South transmission line?
Yeah, part of the analysis for the detailed engineering work is to determine the phasing of the additional sized lines around the project. So whatever we do will be phased in appropriately for the demands associated with the final design and capacities of the well and the booster station, et cetera.
A question here, more kind of formed as a statement, but why does the city need to spend money acquiring a new property when there are viable areas already owned by the city? So more of a kind of a statement, I think, in that term. Next, what is, and again, we don't know the cost yet of the Farley property for sure. What is the difference in cost between the baseball field and the Farley property? Chris, Neil?
I don't know that we can answer that. The baseball property is owned by the city. I think you indicated that Jamie represented there is an agreement with the school district that was updated a few years ago. We'd have to look at the terms of that before we would consider doing anything on that property. So, I mean, we currently own the property, so there's no cost. And then for the Farley property, it could be $4 million.
Next question, just so everybody knows, we're down to 13 minutes left. We'll get through as many questions as we can. We will save all these questions, answer those that we can't. We will post all these questions and make them available on the website. If the entire Farley property is purchased and there is room for the city to build residential dwellings on the remainder of the property, could you please not allow that to be high density housing? Please keep with the surrounding areas as single family homes, preferably without apartments. In the previous meeting, Mayor Bruntz made clear the intent of the council to not allow high density housing to be at that site or really anywhere other than those areas strategically identified along State Street. Next, where can the cost break down between sites? I don't like the answer of they just put new artificial turf. I would like to see the hard numbers. This is referring to Mountain View High School football field. So
yeah, I think we explained that there were more reasons than simply the new artificial turf, but you can imagine when you are trying to get to 4th South and the further you are away, the more it costs, then obviously that location is going to be much more expensive and further away. And when you're talking about restoring a football field and some viewing stadium area, that's going to be more than the grass field. So,
Neil, could you just mention approximately, I think you've given this number before, for every foot or however you measure it that we have to build that pipe, what are we looking at?
Yeah, at the depth that we would look there, it'd be $500 plus per foot.
Okay. Next question. If the entire orchard could be turned into another park, I would vote for that. With such a housing boom in the surrounding area, I believe it would be a good idea to preserve an area like this for a children's park before there is no more land to do so. Opportunities like this are becoming more and more rare. So a statement of, if we were to use the orchard, turning the entire thing into a park. Statement, Orem Elementary is a walking school. Only buses are special needs. Let's see. Our vote, we have somebody saying our vote would be for the blue section. Okay, so another question. So for all of the discussion about what the property would look like after construction has been hypothetical, with pretty pictures being shown of other projects, but we could equally show water storage sites that end up looking industrial. Before a final decision is made, Will a guaranteed site plan be given and feedback from residents taken?
Yes, we're looking to obtain, community feedback on all things regarding restoration of the parks. We've met with the next door neighbor of the proposed well and pump house, if that is where that indeed goes. And we would solicit their input directly and try to make it look as nice as we can. We've indicated that our properties in Orem, while it looks nice on 8th South and 9th East, it does have more of an industrial look, and so we're sensitive to that concern, and we've addressed that in evaluating these locations that are in Sandy. So I think I can represent that we're going to make it look like a property that would blend in nicely to that neighborhood. It will look like a home, for example, if it's on 350 South.
Next question, and it just ... and ensure it doesn't turn into a parking lot. And I don't know at the time of this if it was specifically referring to the orchard or the pump house.
Probably the orchard, yeah.
And if there was a park, there would need to be some level of parking, I believe, if I'm speaking not out of turn. Somebody just voting their thoughts of, I'd love to see an Orem Heritage Park. Our orchards are dwindling. It'd be cool to have some orchard and let the community learn more about our history, have classes on tree pruning, etc. Could be an amazing space for our city rather than more housing. Another vote, a vote for the property already owned by Orem City. It seems like a wise choice than purchasing additional residential property. Another one, I agree, property already owned by the city. Somebody says, plus the savings of the pump house purchase, if you purchase the Farley property, another $650,000 in savings, which was referenced in a previous question. Where would the entrance, if we refer to the Farley property, what street would the entrance come off of? We'd strongly oppose it coming through a residential street.
Yeah, we have obviously not looked at all the details, but we would assume that the Farley property, there's a dead end road at the south of that. We would suggest that the construction access and the access to that park would come off directly of 4th West and start there.
Statement. I see that the city's analysis to the entire water system, especially for the future, is very responsible and is needed and in the best interest of the city, especially for the central zone. As a neighbor, I would suggest additional consideration should address construction access in and out from Orem Elementary, amount of irrigation or likely over irrigation on top of tank for turf grass and traditional irrigation, and cost of purchasing land compared to trade-off savings for shallow or pipe depths on the Farley property. Thanks for being forthright and responsive to questions. Next, Michael Olson, is an above ground tank being considered? You just mentioned a $750,000 savings to have it at higher elevation. Were you talking about a higher location or the tank itself? All the discussion so far has been about a below ground tank.
Yeah, so every one of these tanks that we've represented would be buried. And so sorry if I was misleading on that, but the property that is the Farley property is at a higher elevation in terms of the contours here. So with respect to 6 West and 4 South, it's about 6 feet higher in elevation for the current ground elevation. It's kind of in a hole too. As you look at the contours, it all slopes and flows from the northeast to the southwest. And as you've looked at that property, perhaps neighbors have looked at that, you'll notice that it's sunken down a little bit. That is because it's flood irrigated. So we see an opportunity here to perhaps raise the site up with the same elevation as the back of walk and for the finished grade. So it'll be buried.
Just another statement, the Farley property offers residents of Orem another guaranteed park or green space, and the residents surrounding this property a park instead of more residential homes when a developer decides. Another statement, Orem Elementary has 2 drop-off areas. I agree with the mayor. Safety of children is a must. I have, this is Cami Little. I have 3 little children. I have 3 children currently attending Orem Elementary that walk through the park. It would be much more dangerous for them if the tank were placed in the park or baseball field. Please take that into consideration. What about the light at 4th South and 4th West? I was told when my kids were there that was happening. They're in college now.
I assume they're talking about a signal light.
A signal light, 4th West, 4th South.
I'll take that.
But yeah, you know, Chris, given what we're talking, if you feel like it relates to this project, let's take it. If not, let's move on to.
Well, I don't suppose it relates to this project, but you're right. The commenter here says that it's been discussed for some time. There is a plan to have an improvement there, either for a signal or another type of like a roundabout intersection. I know that is probably our number 1 or number 2 priority intersection for a new signal.
We're down to our final 4 minutes. I want to make sure we're getting to some additional questions. Well, again, we'll post all of these statements. A lot of discussion about the baseball field. The mayor, sounds like the mayor's stuck on the field. What temporary baseball field would the high school fields be moved to? Mayor, would you like to take that one?
Sure. I don't know that I have an answer for that, but I do know that we have room over at the Sarah Park. We have large area there. I also know that the Orchard Park, which some may not be familiar with, but it's north of the junior high and Orchard Elementary, is a large park area that the city owns that is not used hardly at all. So we have areas where Mountain View High School can play baseball in other areas. We just have to look at which areas would make the most sense and would be the most convenient for them. We have room in other parks to be able to hold baseball games.
Great. A question. I'd love to know what will happen to the playground at Community Park in all of these scenarios. It was redone recently, and it would be sad if it had to be torn down or unable to be used for 2 years. Fortunately, Orem does have a lot of great playgrounds. So the plans for the community park, if you were to do any of these projects, what would happen to the playground? Chris, can you hear me?
Yeah, is it my turn? I don't.
Oh,
Sorry, I was actually typing something else. The playground in this scenario would be out of service during this time. It's close to the construction site, and again, the final dimensions aren't finalized, and so with keeping safety in mind, staging, we would need to take that out of service.
Down to just our last couple minutes, just a statement. No to the dog park idea, 100% opposed to that. Is there a point where Mr. Farley needs to definitely indicate one way or the other if he's going to keep his home in this process? Yes,
absolutely. So we're like I mentioned earlier, we're in the middle of obtaining an appraisal for this property. It's been represented here that maybe he does want to move, and we've heard others that say he would like to stay. So obviously that needs to be clarified and resolved as a part of this transaction.
Maybe with our last couple minutes, there's a couple questions that I think are good ones to finish on. One, how long would it take to build the tank, which would disrupt Orem Elementary? But how long would this construction take?
We're anticipating construction to be about 24 months. We believe there are ways to make the construction quicker. Some of that compromises time of day, weekend work, etc. But generally speaking, from the time that major construction starts until significant completion is reached is around 24 months. We hope that it could be sooner. Obviously, there's opportunities for shortages of labor and manpower and materials, but we're fairly confident in that 24-month time period.
So I'll do two final questions here. One, how loud are the pumps? Would they be annoying to the sites with close neighbors?
No, they would not. Our most current well, or the newest well that we drilled was on 800 South and 9th East, and that's been in service now for, I don't know, is it 5 years, Neil? 6 years? Maybe more. We haven't received one complaint on that. So we take extra measures to ensure that it's double walled and we have double doors and it's insulated. It'll have maybe a humming sound on the inside, but outside you won't even notice it.
Let's finish on this question. I know we're a minute over, but I think this is a good one to conclude with. Tell us the process from here, and how will this decision ultimately be made? Is this a vote? Is it a decision by the city council? Is it a decision by staff? Tell us kind of from here to decision time.
Well, that could go for quite some time to give a lesson in Civics 101. Staff's the administrative branch of executing the will and the pleasure of the legislative body voted in by the people of Orem, who are the city council. Staff is charged with giving all of the information to inform the city council so that they can make educated decisions for and on behalf of the entire city constituency, meaning all residents of Orem. So we have brought them opportunities, and we have offered them a recommendation. They have asked us in previous meetings to bring back best cost estimates, and we have. I imagine that we're going to work through some preliminary negotiations with Mr. Farley. We have yet to get a full official appraisal, and we'll take that information and gather all of the information with cost estimates and impacts to different people and locations, and answer all of their questions that they have similar to the format that they have here. And then we'll move forward with the plan once we have settled on that. So will it be voted on by the people? We don't do engineering typically by vote, but obviously we are seeking out the input of the people tonight to hear their concerns. The city council is hearing their concerns, and then we'll put the information in front of those legislative bodies and ask for their direction, and we will execute according to those desires.
I would just add to that this will be a work session item at our city council meeting on February 23rd. I don't know what the time, the start of that meeting is, Stephen, if you have that handy, but that will be published and advertised. That already is, I believe, at least tomorrow. But that'll be in a work session for the council to discuss and us to review. So we'd invite you to join.
Yeah, and those meetings are streamed live on our YouTube channel as well. Orem.org/meetings is where the agenda will be posted. So yeah, that'll be a work session item. Well, let's go ahead and close here. We'll again post all comments and questions on our website. Thanks again for participating. We went late into the evening. It shows your interest in obviously your neighborhood and in this community, and it's our interest as well to keep this one make the decision that's best for Orem. And we recognize there's a lot of things that come into play. Safety is a concern wherever this is built, but there's a lot of other things that come into consideration as it relates to engineering and cost and other things. But Thanks so much. Appreciate our staff, our mayor and city council being here late into the evening for the last few hours. This has been a great opportunity for us to hear from you and see many of you and put some faces to names as we've had discussions and things. So if there's any additional things that you want to reach out and ask questions about, we'd invite you to go to orem.org/water tank. This is the webpage we've been using where we will post this video along with the other meeting we had earlier tonight. On there is a way to contact us. You'll be able to provide your email address. That will go to our city staff. They'll be able to reach out to you to answer those questions. So with that, I will, again, just thank you for being here and thank staff and wish you a wonderful evening and invite you to stay in touch and stick with us as we continue to vet this and make the decision that we hope is best for the citizens of Orem.
I'd just like to add, Stephen, this document, the frequently asked questions document, is a live document, and we will continue to add to that. So continue to go out there and look and look for the updates. Thank you.
Thanks, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.